You think minimalism is about clean white shelves, empty desks, owning less. But what if that's just the surface? What if real minimalism, the kind that shifts your soul, not just your space, has nothing to do with how your apartment looks, and everything to do with what your spirit still clings to? Let me take you somewhere else. Imagine this. You're sitting alone in a silent room. No phone, no sound, no books, no distractions, just you. Most people call that peace, but if you've ever really tried it, you know what actually rises in that silence: grief, memories, loops, old fears, shame, regret, resistance. This is where spiritual minimalism begins, not with what you throw away, but what finally catches up to you when nothing's left to hide behind. And here's what no one tells you. Spiritual minimalism isn't a lifestyle. It's a reckoning, a stripping away of every story you've ever used to define yourself, until what's left isn't you, but what was there before you began. People love to declutter their homes. Few have the courage to declutter their beliefs, because once you start asking, what part of me did I build just to be loved? What emotions do I keep just so I don't forget? What roles am I playing because silence scares me? Things start to fall apart, not around you, inside you. And when that collapse begins, you'll see why real minimalism isn't pretty. It's brutal, and it's sacred. They never tell you what happens next. After the silence, after the purge, after you've sat with your past so long it stops screaming and starts whispering, you'd think that's the moment peace arrives. It's not. It's the moment your ego panics. Because once you begin releasing the false identities, the achiever, the helper, the victim, the mystic, the rebel, you don't feel free. You feel empty. And that's the part no one warns you about. That beneath the clutter of your personality, there isn't an instant glow. There's a void, not because something is wrong, but because something is gone. The attachments you mistook for self, the pain you wore like armor, the pride that kept you separate, the image you edited for the world, gone. And in their place, silence again. But this time, it's different. It doesn't echo, it listens. But most people run at this stage. They grab at anything, a new belief, a new project, a new identity, because we don't fear emptiness. We fear what it might reveal. Spiritual minimalism is not about what you live without. It's about how little you're willing to stand naked in your own presence and not flinch. And the paradox? The less you carry, the heavier it feels, at first. But keep going, and you'll realize it was never your soul that felt the weight. It was everything you'd built to protect it. There's a moment in the journey no one can prepare you for. It's not when you let go of the external. It's when the internal starts to go quiet, not peaceful, just quiet. You stop needing to explain yourself. You stop performing. You stop reaching. And that sounds like liberation, until you realize how addicted we've become to proving we exist. Without labels, who are you? Without opinions, what anchors you? Without your wounds, what gives you the right to speak? This is where the deeper purge begins, not of your stuff, but of your story. You start noticing the subtle hooks, the way you casually drop your struggles into conversation just to feel seen, the way you overcompensate with insight to earn respect, the way you fear being misunderstood more than being disconnected. And then the questions shift. What part of me still needs to be believed? What am I performing for when no one's watching? What would I say if I didn't need it to sound wise? This isn't self-hatred, it's self-exposure. Because spiritual minimalism isn't just about detaching, it's about disarming the mechanisms you built to survive love. And you begin to notice something strange. The quieter you get, the louder your presence becomes. Not in volume, in clarity. Because when you no longer need to take up space, you finally realize you are space. There comes a point in every journey where identity dissolves but essence hasn't yet spoken. It's the in-between, the sacred disorientation. You're no longer who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. And in that space, where the stories have fallen away, where the roles no longer fit, the silence shifts. It becomes heavier, not because it's full, but because you finally notice how much of your life was built to escape it. You start to see it everywhere, in the way we fill every quiet moment with noise, in how we decorate our spiritual practice just to feel productive, in how we grasp at purpose as if existing wasn't already enough. This is where most people turn back, because this part isn't inspiring. It's raw, it's empty, it's slow. No fireworks, no downloads, no ascension. Just the long, slow unraveling of who you thought you needed to be. And in that unraveling, a terrifying realization. You don't know who you are, not really, because every version of you up until now, even the spiritual one, was still curated, still sculpted for safety, still tethered to an outcome. And now, there's just breath, just space, just awareness. And if you can stay there, without numbing, without naming, something ancient begins to rise. Not a new self, not an upgraded ego, but something before all that, something untouched by time, titles, or trauma, something still and watching. You don't find that part, you remember it. And then it happens, not suddenly, not like an epiphany, but quietly, like a long-forgotten language being remembered, syllable by syllable. It doesn't speak in words. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't even call itself you. But you feel it, in the space between thoughts, in the stillness beneath breath, in the strange sense that someone is watching, and it's not God, it's you. Before the stories, before the striving, before the shame, it's the you that was never built, never broken, never in need of fixing. And for the first time, you don't want to perform. You don't need to be wise. You don't need to be seen. You just want to remain here, silent, unstructured, true. And that's when you begin to understand. Spiritual minimalism isn't about stripping things away so that you can be someone new. It's about removing everything that was never really you to begin with. Not to add, but to reveal. You don't become better. You become real. And with that, everything changes. You no longer crave to be understood, because what you found can't be explained. You no longer rush to fill the space, because now you trust the silence. And in that trust, you realize something radical. You don't need more time. You don't need more tools. You don't even need more healing. You're not a project. You're a presence, and presence is already complete. You return to the world slowly, not with fire, with breath. You speak less, not because you're withholding, but because you've realized how much of what we say is just noise we call connection. You move with fewer steps. You react with fewer urges. You reach for less, and yet strangely, you feel more aware, more precise, more alive. Because when the clutter is gone, your attention sharpens like a blade. You see things others overlook, the way someone inhales before they lie, the hunger behind a compliment, the tension behind a smile. You're not judging, you're simply present. And presence doesn't analyze, it absorbs, it listens, it knows. And here's the paradox they never teach. The more deeply you inhabit yourself, the more space you hold for others. Not by giving advice, not by fixing them, but by being so still that they remember stillness exists. Spiritual minimalism isn't about building a better self. It's about becoming such clear space that anything untrue cannot survive in your presence, not because you force it, but because you no longer participate in the performance. You don't need to win. You don't need to be right. You don't even need to explain your piece. You just embody it. And that embodiment that's what starts to rearrange the world around you, not because you're trying, but because you've stopped trying to be anything else. Eventually, you stop thinking of it as minimalism. It's not a style anymore, not a method, not even a practice. It's a frequency, a way of being that feels like clean air, a quiet room after the music stops, a field after the storm. You walk into spaces, and instead of filling them, you simply allow them to exist. You no longer need to hold the room. You just become the silence it settles into, and people feel it, not because you preach, but because you no longer compete with the noise. And in that simplicity, there is power, not the kind that controls, the kind that clarifies. You become a tuning fork for truth, a filter for authenticity, and without meaning to, you start reminding others what real presence feels like. Not curated, not performative, just unedited. The irony, you used to think letting go would make you smaller, but now you see, it made you vast. Because there is more spaciousness in one breath of clarity than in 1,000 things that promise to complete you. And now, you look at the world not with lack, but with discernment. Not, what can I add to become more, but, what can I release to become true? Because what's real doesn't need adornment, and what's sacred is always simple. Eventually, even the seeking dissolves. You don't wake up craving insight. You don't open books to find truth. You don't meditate to fix anything. You just live, not passively, but purely. You move with precision, not because you're controlling, but because there's nothing left in you to scatter. You act when it's true. You speak when it's clean. You rest without guilt. And that's when you realize the final layer of spiritual minimalism isn't detachment. It's devotion, not to a system, not to an identity, but to the raw intelligence that pulses behind all of it. The kind of devotion that doesn't wear robes or chant mantras. The kind that shows up in how you close a door, how you say no, how you love someone without needing to teach them. It's in the pause before reaction, the breath before response, the empty space you now refuse to fill just because others are uncomfortable with quiet. And in that space you begin to recognize you are no longer chasing peace. You are what peace returns to, because the more you dissolve, the more you become what you were always trying to find. And in the end, there's nothing more to say, nothing more to hold, nothing more to prove. Just one question remains. Can you remain empty long enough to feel what's always been whole? The world hasn't changed. The same headlines, the same traffic, the same noise. But you no longer carry it all inside. You no longer respond from habit. You no longer seek approval disguised as kindness. You no longer chase what was never yours to begin with. You listen more. You speak softer. You choose your yes with reverence and your no with peace. You no longer crave to be everywhere. You just want to be where you are, completely. Because the more minimal your soul becomes, the more maximal your experience of reality gets. You notice how deeply light falls into a room, how silence can hum, how a single sentence from a stranger can feel like a mirror. You're not detached, you're available to life, to loss, to love, not as a character in the story, but as the space that holds it. And the people around you, some will drift, not because you changed, but because now you no longer reflect their confusion. Others will arrive, quiet, clear, still, and when they sit with you, they'll feel it, not your presence, but their own. That's how you'll know. Spiritual minimalism isn't something you practice, it's something you become. So maybe the question isn't, how do I live with less? Maybe the real question is, what have I been holding that's never belonged to me? Old identities, inherited fears, unlived dreams, unnecessary noise. Let it fall, let it all fall, not because it's wrong, but because it's time. Because the truth you've been looking for was never hiding in a method, a ritual, a lifestyle. It's what remains when you finally stop trying to improve what was already whole. So, if this journey stirred something in you, if a part of you is ready to let go, not to escape, but to come home, then share your signal. Leave a comment. Let the others know they're not alone in this silence. And if you're ready to keep walking with less baggage and more clarity, subscribe, not just to this channel, but to the version of you that doesn't need to be louder to be heard. Because sometimes, truth doesn't arrive with a bang, it arrives as a whisper, and that whisper is you.